Hey there everyone, this is Jeremy, the Music Andy, and we're here today to talk about 1111 from Pinegrove. Indie rock, alt country, Midwest emo, coming from Montclair, New Jersey. Pinegrove is a 5-piece band that really sticks to their strengths and don't really derive from them. This band has 5 members in it, and it really helps create a very nice form of instrumentation around the beautiful vocals from Evan. I'm going to do this review a little bit differently than the reviews that I've done in the past. Rather than going track by track and saying what I think of each one, I'm just going to talk about the positives and then I'm going to talk about the negatives. So let's go right into this album. As I said, let's start off with the positive, and the positives really come right away with this album. The first 3 tracks on this are by far the best tracks on this and the most memorable and attention to detail focused songs. Immediately I can tell how much I'm going to like this album from the lead track Habitat, which is very dynamic. The tones on this song are very, very interesting. They're always changing and adapting to the environment that they find themselves in. Evan, as I said before, is a beautiful singer. The lyricism on this, the wordplay, the way that it's delivered, it's very poetic. The matching syllables and just the way that it weaves in between each lines. I just love this track and his writing all throughout this album. Alaska cuts into a much more upbeat indie track. It's very momentum driving. It is a song that really, fuck me, I need to have this not on low power mode. Alaska is a much more upbeat indie rock song. This is a song that is very driven by momentum. It is full of energy until it ultimately bursts into this dazzling display at the end of the song from the band. Iodine finishes the trilogy of this epic 3-song series, and it is just very changing in emotion. It goes from this kind of somber approach with a little color coming from the guitar to this just explosion of color, throwing it all over the canvas and just smearing it completely with all these instruments diving in and each finding a unique footing in the song. This crescendo of color that comes in it reminds me musically a lot of something that would come from Toe or Fishman's, especially the bass that's on this. It's very off rhythm, it's very funky. The guitars are twinkling with light, and the drummer is nothing to scoff at. It's very reserved, but it is very memorable and it's very unique. The only problem that I have with this track is that it goes with a fade out. There are a few times that a fade out works in a song, but it just doesn't here. I feel like if they were to have an ending to it, it would really tie it all together. But what can I say? This is an amazing song, and as I said, these 3 songs in the beginning are just very well written. After these 3 songs, we kind of have a switch of intensity. We go to a little bit more of the alt country side of this album, and Respirate is a perfect example of how the band does this very well. These songs are a lot more reserved, but in these songs like Respirate, there is still that attention to detail. The mixing of tones and the progressions and evolution of the song are just very nice to listen to. The drummer has this moment where it kind of matches to Evan's ramblings, to the rhythm of it, to the melody of it, to the beat of it, and it's just something that I want to listen to every single time that I listen to this album, kind of giving it a much more of a replay value instead of just an initial one listen and then I move on. Let and Swimming are 2 other tracks that I think they also kind of nail it. Similar to Respirate, these songs are a lot more reserved, like I said, but they still have that attention to detail. Not as much as Respirate, but there's still a big chunk of it that there is there. Also, I think the choruses on these 2 songs are very catchy, very melodic, and they just always kind of stick in my head when I'm listening to it, and even after the fact of listening to the album. I think the choruses on both of these songs are very catchy and very melodic. They add a very comforting feeling to the back half of this album. Now let's move on to the negatives, and I don't want to spend too much time here because overall I do think that this is a good album. And honestly, if I'm saying it, I think that this is the best album that Pinegrove has put out so far. Some of these songs on this album feel a little too safe. They go a little bit too jammy, especially when you're comparing it to the front half of this album. Flora makes me feel like I'm on a road trip and I just end up in this rural town and I stop in a bar and everybody's kind of square dancing to this upbeat music. And you know, upon review, that really doesn't sound that bad. However, comparatively to when I was first listening to this album, the only thing that I was doing prior was just kind of ripping my heart out and just moving it up, down, left, and right, kind of swinging my emotions all around. It just is a more linear style of track and an otherwise more, evolution, progressive based album. And it didn't have the wow moments that these other tracks had, which is why I don't like this approach too much from the band. This is just a little too linear of a track for me. It kind of goes with the song Orange, which is like one of the biggest songs on this album. But again, it was just too linear. It never had those wow moments that the rest of the tracks, especially the first three, had. Then honestly, the last two tracks on this kind of just lumped together for me. There's nothing too offensive here. It doesn't make me want to turn it off and run into a corner and just start eating ice cream for comfort. But it doesn't really make me feel anything, and it doesn't move me like the previous tracks did. Altogether, like I said prior, this is a good album, and I feel that this is the best album that the band has put out to this date. I'm thinking, and now I'm done thinking, I'm going to give this album 7.5 alarm clocks out of 10. What did you think of this album? What albums would you like me to review in the future? Please leave a comment below and let me know. Subscribe if you like the content, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.